Budget report. Administration will update the board on the development of the district's 2016-17 budget. The presentation will include an update of the fiscal year 17 cost increase estimates, a review of the budget reductions taken over the last several years, operational efficiencies in place, and a review of how we are spending this year's budget. This item provides an opportunity for the board's information and discussion.
Sorry.
We need a lot of
Yeah.
His department cut beans as part of their budget.
Yeah. Yeah. It was one of the cuts back in 2009-10. President Arnold, Superintendent Allison, members of the board, I'm going to go back to a comment made at the very beginning of this meeting. This is a fun-filled evening. Okay. Please keep that in mind. Okay. And what I'm going to do tonight, I'm going to go back and I've revised the cost estimates, and you won't like what you're going to see because they went up rather than down. But then we're going to take a look back at what has happened since about 2008-9. And so we're going to kind of take a look to remind you and everyone else. Some of you went through that time period, some of you did not. And I have to tell you that as I worked through this over the weekend and through today and last week, I'm sometimes come up with words like gulp and things like that get quoted. This one is staggering. For me, this was staggering to look at this information. Then we're also going to look at what we've done over that same time period and actually before that in terms of some efficiencies. And we'll look and see how we're currently spending our money. This is the revised summary of estimated cost increases for next year. The highlighted ones are ones that changed, two of the three went up. The transportation contract went up, and it will change. I know it will. We're still working on projecting that budget for next year. But it went up primarily because this year we transported kids, we will have transported kids 171 days. Next year we're going to transport kids 173 days, okay, because of the way the contract works. So that the increase there basically reflects 2 more days of transportation. But one of the things about all of these budget pieces is that every month that we get closer to the end of the fiscal year, we are better able to project where we're going to finish this budget year and with regard to how that will look next year. And case in point, the vehicle fuel is zero because of the fuel costs for us right now are so low that we are saving enough money out of this year's budget to cover the cost increases for next year. And of course, we think that those prices are going to stay down, but we've got a budget built to be able to sustain the fuel consumption for next year as well. The health insurance reserves went up primarily because of the detailed data analysis that I did in preparation for the presentation at the last board meeting. And again, we still haven't decided or haven't come up with all of the options that you will look at with regard to how to deal with that. So I expect those numbers to actually change as well. So you can see we went up just a little bit, somewhere between 16 and 30 million. And I would have to comment that Mr. Means' suggestion to me this morning that we respond to an email, where was it from, Nassau? Jamaica. To be able to come up with $15 million probably wasn't a good way to go. So we're watching our emails a little more closely now. So let's take a little bit a trip back. And I want to go back to the high point in the funding was July of 2008. The legislatures had approved the funding at that time and set the base state aid at $44.33. That lasted all of 2 weeks. About the middle of July of that year, the governor lowered the base state aid to $4,400. And then partway into that fiscal year, because the economy, the bottom dropped out of the economy, there were mid-year cuts in that year. So that high point in that funding is where I chose to start looking at things. And when you look at that, our general fund, LOB, and capital outlay budgets in that year totaled $437 million. This year, general fund, LOB, and capital outlay totals $439 million. So that's assuming we get the money this year, but that's what our budget is. So we have received more money now than we did back in 2008-9, a whole 0.6%. Now, part of the challenge here is that if from 2008-9 to now had been just a very steady, very slight increase, we wouldn't have dealt with near the problems that you got to deal with, because what actually happened is represented in this graph. The blue line on this graph is if we had been funded based on the statute at that particular time. Now, and they didn't actually change the statute until this last year. So that would have been taken into consideration, the enrollment factors and that sort of thing. So had we been funded at the statutory level, we would have been at $492 million this year instead of $439. Now, and I understand economic recession and that sort of thing, so they couldn't do that. They really couldn't because they didn't have money, and at least for a few years. And then when the economy started turning around, we did see a little bit of a rebound. But what I'm going to talk about in terms of the cuts, the budget changes that took place, and I'm going to kind of group into 3 years. The fiscal year 10, 11, and 12 is where we went down the furthest, and then 13, 14, and 15, some of the funding rebounded, and you'll see some changes in what took place at that point. So we'll look back now to fiscal year 10, 11, and 12, and I'm not going to take a lot of time to explain any of this. These are just some of the cuts that were documented over that period of time.
And this is not an exhaustive list.
No.
Budget transfers, one-time maneuvers. It would be a much larger list if we looked at everything that was done to try to bring our budget in line. These are just some of the more significant cuts that seem to stand out when we think of program and services.
Eliminated 35% of the central administration, 6% of the instructional staff, reduced classified support staff and limited overtime, eliminated the SRO program at the middle school, eliminated driver's ed and eliminated Metro Midtown and reduced numerous other instructional programs. Continuing, this is still 10, 11, and 12, changed school start times to save on transportation, reduced overtime, reduced field trips, moved technology replacement from a cycle from 5 to 6 years, delayed textbook purchases, moved to a 4-day, 10-hour summer work week, eliminated job sharing, eliminated the Grow Your Own Teacher program. Continuing, eliminated neighborhood revitalization program rebates, reduced parents as teachers, moved some 260-day employees to 230 days, increased athletic ticket prices, eliminated high school librarians, eliminated fifth grade strings, reduced elementary counselors, and used contingency reserve funds in FY 11 and 12. Yeah. Moving on. 13 and 14. Now we start to see a little bit of rebound. The base state aid came up a little bit, and enrollment during this whole time, by the way, was increasing through that. And in 13 and 14, the base state aid came up, and that in combination with the enrollment increases, we were able to give salary increases in both of those years. And when I talk about 1% salary increases, that there's 4 different employee groups, and their actual, what they got and their paycheck and that sort of thing doesn't always match when you say 1%, because sometimes there were steps and tracks involved, and some got it and some didn't. So these were just kind of the base salary increases that we funded in those years. And we started adding back in instructional positions, but at the same time, we eliminated some operational administrative staff positions. And then in FY13, now the decision to do this was actually done in FY12, but in FY13, you closed 3 schools, relocated 3 schools, and opened 2 new schools. And this is all in conjunction with the bond projects and that sort of thing that was going on at that time. FY15, again, there was a slight decrease in funding, mostly because the base changed a little bit there, but because the capital outlay resolution changed, we were able to move $10 million out of general fund over to capital outlay in expenditures, which allowed about a 2% increase in that year. But unfortunately, mid-year equalization aid was the equalization aid was cut, and we wound up having to use some contingency reserve at the end of that fiscal year to keep our LOB afloat for that budget year. And in this year, no salary increases this year, but we did reduce the contract by 2 days with no reduction in pay. We've currently used $3 million in contingency reserves to balance the budget. We reduced about 14 positions through attrition. We reduced the ESOL adult program. That's now a virtual program. And we cut our non-salary budgets by 10%. So when you think back over that period of time and what was done, it's pretty staggering to understand what you did to keep the doors open, so to speak. But one of the things that was also going on at the same time, you were cutting budgets and reallocating in budgets, but the efficiencies that the district has put into place have really kept it from being much worse. And again, this is not an exhaustive list of some of the things we've done, but I think it gives you a fair representation. Of course, energy is the one that we talk about quite a bit. We have probably the best energy conservation, energy purchasing program that you'll find anywhere in the state. But it goes beyond that too. Our facility shutdowns save us a lot of funding, a lot of money, and our interventions and basically the Westar rate cases has really saved us, and quite frankly, anybody that uses Westar electricity on schools quite a bit of money. Facility division, the use of the STAT process. Again, this is tracking data that gives us the ability to get better at what we do. That's the best way to put it for the facility side of it. The increased use of technology with that staff. Again, closing the 5 inefficient buildings really saved us quite a bit on the utility side as well. And the partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, that groups came in and took a look at HR, purchasing, and the IT departments, and quite a number of recommendations that have been implemented in the HR department. The IT audit really didn't produce a lot for us because nobody could quite figure out how we could do it any better or with fewer people than we're already doing. And on the purchasing side, we are now working on some of the recommendations and things that came out of some of that partnership. Continuing on, with the district the size that we are, we have been trying to leverage that size in purchasing and technology. We currently use purchasing co-ops and volume purchasing and bidding, and we don't always work one way or the other. The purchasing staff does a very good job of analyzing and looking to see which is the best way to go, which will save us the most amount of money. We're getting a lot more detailed analysis of that spend now as we move forward. On the technology purchasing side, again, our size gives us some negotiating room when it comes to software and licensing contracts. We're also using a lot of RFP processes to, again, increase competitive and help us save money across the board here. And on the tech side, using our own staff is, we save a tremendous amount of money in support of over 40,000 computers, 2,000 servers, and our own wide area network system. Where if we were contracting that out, we probably wouldn't be able to afford what we're able to do right now. Continuing on with some more efficiencies. And this is one, the MTSS as an efficiency, this slide really came about this last fall when we presented testimony to the K-12 Commission asking about efficiencies and that sort of thing. And we got to analyzing what MTSS has done for us in terms of actually saving money. MTSS was originally has been implemented to best meet the needs of the student academic needs. But what we have found out is that there's an added benefit on the efficiency side because we now have a district-wide framework at delivering instruction. The assessment system, the problem solving, behavior supports are all implemented district-wide, and it's easier and costs less to provide that professional development and keep those things going. We have a lot of students that move around in our district, the transient students within our district. Now they have the ability to see the same instruction no matter where they are. And it also has saved us quite a bit in terms of focusing materials and textbooks, so we're buying all the same thing for all of our buildings. So the MTSS model has really helped us on that side of managing the funding that has to go along with that. I want to spend just a little bit of time, and you've probably seen some of this right now, but again, I think it's important for us to understand where we are spending our money right now. We've been criticized, the governor's even criticized Wichita Public Schools for not spending enough money in the classroom. We beg to differ about that a little bit because, and it may come down to a definition of it or whatever, but what we believe is spending in the classroom not only includes the teachers and the paras, but also the nurses, social workers, the librarians, the school administration, food service, transportation, and we got to be able to turn the lights on to have school. So when you look at all of those pieces of that puzzle, we are spending 88.1% of our operating budget in the classroom, and surprisingly, that is also 88.3% of our personnel. So our people and our money goes into the classrooms in those particular areas. Now, but what about the other 12%? Well, what does it take to keep our schools operating? And we have 97 schools, but we actually have about 113 various sites. And to operate those daily and keep things going requires that other 12% of people. We have highly skilled support that helps those building leaders and the classroom teachers continue to provide instruction. And when you think about almost 10 million square feet of buildings and 1,780 acres of property, it takes a lot of effort to make that happen. 7.2% of that 12% is in facility maintenance. And we have skilled labor in electrical, roofing, maintenance, glass, plumbing, grounds, and security systems that helps keep us up and functioning. And if we were to be contracting out all of that, the labor that those provide, again, we wouldn't be able to do some of the things we currently do. And a case in point, a couple of examples here. Where our facilities folks and operations keep things going. if we have a major event at one of our buildings, water loss or electrical outages, we have staff that can respond very quickly and keep the buildings and the instruction going. And if you look at it from a standpoint of what might happen in another school district, think about water at a building, and if we lost water at a building, if a main broke out in the street or something, we didn't have water in a building. If you were in another school district, we'd probably send the kids home. But in Wichita, we are there with water for them. We keep the toilets working and all that, and we don't lose that instructional time. And take you back to when we had the fire at College Hill, and the response from our staff to completely move us to not a brand new building, a different building on the other side of town, and the students only lost 1 day of instruction. That could not have been done in any other school district that I've ever worked in. So I think we can't, we have to be careful that if we look at reducing the maintenance facility staff, that we might wind up hurting ourselves even more. And one of the things that's not on here that I always talk about too, if we didn't have that staff, the first time it snowed, we wouldn't have school no matter how much it snowed, because there are no contractors in this area that could handle clearing 97 schools in the time that needs to be done. So you have to keep some of those types of things in mind. The one that I like the most, just because I'm an old band director, and I have to tell you a story. I started my teaching career in Wichita Public Schools. At South High School, I was instrumental music director there from 75 to 79. This was right after the service center had opened. Okay, but I was a brand new teacher, green teacher coming out of college, and really didn't understand everything that I was going to wind up doing. So I come to Wichita and I want an instrument repaired. I just fill out a little work order and it goes off and gets repaired and comes back. In the summertime, they come and get my instruments, they fix them and bring them back. Okay. In 1979, I went to the Buehler School District as their band director. And I got to the end of that fiscal year and all of a sudden I found out that I had to do all of that work. Okay, I had to find the contractor. I had to send all that, and this, you can't tell you how much money this saves you. Not only from a standpoint of doing the work in-house at probably a lower cost than what you could contract it out, but also from a standpoint that your staff isn't having to deal with that, and the cost-effective part of it. In my previous job, a school district of about 1/10 the size of this, we were spending $20,000 to $25,000 in the summer to repair instruments. Okay, multiply that by 10, and that gives you a fair indication of how much money would be spent in that particular area. And I would guess that we probably don't spend that much money at all for what we get right now. Now, the business support service is 3.6% of that 12%. This is where my world lives. The business support services, payroll processing, accounts payable, and also my budget staff. Those are my people that provide all of that transactional work that has to be done to keep the district going. Human resources. Shannon and her staff support 9,000 employees. Now, that sounds like a lot, but understand also that that's not 9,000 employees all at once. I believe last year when we sent out, or this year when we sent out the W-2s, which is more representation of how many people went through your district and got paid, we were close to 11,000. Okay, so 9,000 is a moving number. Instructional technology, I already mentioned this a little bit, 43,000 computers, 2,000 servers that our staff deals with. And this is in the 12%. Okay, that's not considered classroom spending, but still we couldn't survive without these. And then finally, general administration. We get beat up a lot about general administration, but it's only 1% of our operating budget. And I think a lot of times people don't really understand how lean we are at the top, so to speak. Understand that you as a board and your high-paying board jobs, okay, are overseeing the largest governmental budget in Sedgwick County. And maybe even, well, except for the state of Kansas, I would guess that this is the well, I'm pretty sure this is the largest school district budget anywhere. Now, we might not compete. Well, I don't know. We might compete with all the Johnson County. So we're right below the state in terms of size of governmental budget. Does that make your pay get any better? Don't you wish? The other thing that people don't understand is that we operate with a superintendent and 2 assistant superintendents that manage all of our buildings. Now, we've got some other assistant supes, but we've got Bill and Alicia that supervise all of our buildings, okay? My comparison there is my school district in Illinois, same size school district. There was a superintendent and 4 assistant superintendents, and each one of them had 2 assistants too. So there was really about 12 people that managed that. So we are very lean at the top when it comes to that. When we get, believe me, we squeeze those people as much as you can imagine. So the other 12% focused on supporting schools and classrooms every day. So that's really how we are spending our money in this fiscal year and pretty much how we've done in the past. So we took a little stroll down memory lane and looked at some of the things that had happened and some of the things that we've done to try and address some of those challenges. Come March 21st, we will start down the path of looking at what we have to plan to be able to do for fiscal year 17 and actually looking at fiscal year 18 as well. Our plan is to be a committee of the whole where we'll have a chance to present to you options for you to consider, give you opportunity for questions and concerns and discussion, and hopefully come out of that meeting with some direction for us to bring back to you in following meetings. Questions?
Well, this could be directed to either you, Mr. Freeman, or Mr. Allison. Our employees, many of them, feel like we are so top-heavy. That's a comment we hear frequently. I'm not sure how 1% compared to 88% makes you top-heavy. The thing I'm kind of curious about, do we make this information available to our employees so they can see what's actually going on? Because there's a lot of criticism from our own employees that really don't know how lean we operate.
But yes, this information has been made available. It's been presented. We talked about the 65% as well as the other 12% to our principals, and they've been provided the presentation and been asked as they meet with staff to provide this information as well. Getting the opportunity to talk to different employee groups in the district, had this conversation with not only employees at AMAC, but also the School Service Center and the Instructional Service Center. So trying to make this information available to our employees. And having similar conversations with our business community, Rotaries, when provided the opportunity to just explain how do we spend our money, where do our dollars go, and what does that really look like. And I would say from our business community, it's been very enlightening for them. And when they realize the rhetoric they hear around 65% and how narrow that definition is, and when they generate their list would be larger than our 88% because they include some other things that they said just make business sense. We should be including, and we don't in the infogram that we use there. So yes, both internally and externally, we're trying to inform folks and provide a better understanding of what the real information is and how we spend our dollars.
And the other thing I find staggering, right on page 3, $53.2 million difference, if my math is correct, what statute states we should have received versus what we're actually getting. 53.2 million difference. Is that right?
That's right.
53.2.
Exactly. And I will go back and say again that that's where we ought to be if the state would have been able to fund it. Obviously, they couldn't during that downturn time. But the reality of it is that we operate from one year to the next, and it makes it really tough, when we have to deal with such big cuts in the middle of the year. Now, that being said, we wouldn't be having this conversation tonight if we'd been funded, if they would have been able to fund us at that level.
But the reality, when we hear this rhetoric about school districts are receiving more,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe that's true, they are receiving more than they did, but what we should have been allocated by statute, $53.2 million.
And we have received more, but what we've received has not kept up even with inflation, and it's difficult when we have fixed cost increases that run 3 to 5% a year, even with the efficiencies that we try to put into place, to keep up with that when we only have funding over that 7-8 year time span of 0.6%. We just can't keep up.
And one final observation, and I'll turn it over to my fellow colleagues. We have the opportunity to celebrate outstanding teachers tonight, teachers that are making a huge difference, teachers that we've not given a raise in 4 years, right?
No, 2 years ago they received a raise, but it hasn't been again. We give a 1% raise and then take 1% out of their check for capers. So, it hasn't. They haven't really seen very much of a gain for quite a long time.
And I'm talking more like a cost of living is basically what it would equate to.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll turn this over to Cheryl.
Okay, a couple of questions. One is a little bit of a follow-up to what Betty was talking about, but in 2008, we got $431.1 million, and in 2015-16, we're getting $439.7 million, which you say is 0.6%. But that does not show our increased student population during that time, because we've had lots of additional students during
yes.
that time. My guess is around a couple of thousand.
Maybe not quite that high, but there were, when I track the data, I probably should have put that on here too. Until the very last year, it was usually a 1 to 2% increase every year. So when we're talking about starting down in the 40,000 range, so we're talking 400 students a year. So in that time period,
that'd be pretty close
Yep.
to 2,000.
Yep.
And you get 0.6% increase for that many additional students.
Correct.
Besides the fixed costs that have gone up.
Yes.
Our natural gas has gone up, electricity's gone up, everything's gone up. All right. So, that would be, as we're talking with our public, that would be interesting information to have attached. My second question, and it's in regards to all of your look back data, which highlights the budget cuts over these years. And thank you very much for this list, because believe me, I could have told you some of these, but I certainly couldn't have told you all of them. And I know this isn't an absolute complete list. It's just simply highlights. But again, how much money are you talking about?
We were afraid somebody was going to ask that. I can't really tell you, and partly because it doesn't always, it's hard to talk about. We talk about 35% administration or 6% instructional staff, and at that time, we probably had some numbers there, but I don't have any kind of totals to look at there. But when you look at the budget decreases, for us to maintain, you can kind of translate that, and we went from $437 million to $408, so that there's a $30 million decrease over a couple of years' time. So, we were trying to, the district was responding to those reductions. So the dollar amounts over those periods would probably correspond pretty close in total to that. But individual things, we didn't try and tie a
Okay,
number
but
to it.
roughly 30 million?
Oh, at least, yeah. Yeah, at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah, because see, that's something our public doesn't realize either. They hear we're getting more money from the state. How come we can't do that? Well, we live in a different world. We have 2,000 more students. We've already cut 30 million out of our budget approximately, and we're looking at another $16 to $30 million cut this year. And all of these cuts that we've done have hurt us, but we've tried to stay away from the classroom. We're at the point where we can't stay away from the classroom
It's going to be
anymore.
very difficult.
I mean, if we cut our 1% administration, we have no superintendent. We have no,
Well, by law, you have to have a superintendent, but by law, the law doesn't say you have to pay him.
yeah, he might get paid the same as we do.
Sorry, John.
I got a bag of beans.
I'm not going to work for beans. But, yeah, and that's when you just look at our 12%. If we eliminated that 12%, and you look at all the consequences and repercussions, we're still not there. As we've looked back and we looked at amounts we targeted, and at the same time when dollars have changed, whether it was through capital outlay, those aspects, where we've reinvested has been instruction every single time. We took some big dips and we got a little step up. Part of what you also have to remember is the stimulus funding component that we had for a period of time. And we worked very hard not to make that people necessarily, or if we did, knowing that would go away, that we would eventually get some benefit for those investments. So as we've looked, you look at years, particularly 10, 11, 12, I mean, you're 20 million one year, 15 million the next year, about 12 that following year. So it's hard to say, but 30 to 60 million is not unrealistic to think of reductions we've made, and then as revenues, whether it was title funds or stimulus funds or whatever, helped us lift our budget some, we've invested in two areas. We've invested predominantly in instruction, and you've made some choices to take what limited resources you did have and put that when you could into pay raises. So those are the two areas when you see where our expenditures changed. It was around providing what you could in pay raises for our employees, and when it came to positions, it was instructional positions.
And I'd also like to comment too, when you talked about the cuts we're looking at going into next fiscal year, but our budget's not going down, okay? We're looking at probably having to cut or reallocate within our budget, in that range, maybe 20 million. I don't know what it's going to wind up at, but our budget's going to be the same. But for us to balance that budget and still be able to turn on the lights, we've got to make those changes. So when you look at these numbers and it goes from 437 down to 408, you probably should tack on at least $10 million every year for those fixed cost increases on that. So we're probably talking more like the $60 million range in terms of actual budget reductions or reallocations within the budget.
And $60 million is 10% of our budget.
Of the total budget, yeah.
You know, that was one of the conversations we had with Super SAC and going back a couple years when we did the Budget 101 and 102 presentations in the public, was to talk about, of the budget you all as a board have to really work with, is only about 40% of the total budget. The other are really those restricted areas, as in special education, in title, in nutrition services, workers' comp, those areas that are, you really don't have discretion over. Those revenues come in and they have a very specific purpose. So part of what makes this difficult is you've had to reallocate, juggle, and make cuts. You only have a small piece of the overall budget in which to do that with. And I think that's something that with our public we have to continue to remind them. If they see a number and assume that you have full discretion over all those dollars, and what you really have is only about 40% of those dollars in which you make the have to make those difficult decisions.
So our percentage goes up. Instead of being 10% of our total budget, it's 10% of 60% of our total budget, or it's $60 million of our total. If we had $60 million in cuts over the years, then we have to take that out of that 40% that we have left.
Yes.
Lynn?
Going to your fifth slide, the second one of looking back, where we compare the 2008-09 general fund, LOB funding, and capital outlay at 437 versus today at 439.7, the 2.6 million increase. The general fund and LOB funding and capital outlay that you talk about there is what we generate locally, as well as what the state gives us for under the equity issue, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So if you really looked at the difference between 08, 09, and 15, 16, is probably that was local effort of the 2.6 million or even more of that was actually local increase. It was not state increase, because we increased our capital outlay mill levy, I think from 5 or 6 to 8. And same with LOB, as we were able to move the percentage up, we're doing that. So that if there's been an increase, it's been from the local effort, not from the state effort. And again, I think that's one of the snapshots that we always hear. Well, there's more funding in education than ever before. Even if, and I heard the other day with the KPI that, well, even if you take capers out, there's more in it. Well, it is, but it's because of local effort, not because of what the legislature or what the governor has done. So I guess I wanted to make sure we point out, and also the cost to local taxpayers from that equity piece that we keep talking about with the Supreme Court is that if the legislature does their job, you know, we're really talking, I think from the statistics I saw from the State Department of Education, it's an additional $4.5 million for capital outlay, which is actual cash, and it's about $5.5 million that would be property tax relief to our local taxpayers. So we're talking about a $10 million benefit for Sedgwick County from that. Well, actually, just for 259. If you add all the other districts, it's higher than that. So I guess I would again want to call on our local legislators to understand the impact of their failure to look at the state finance formula and what's fair to Sedgwick County, to Wichita Public Schools, and our neighboring districts. So,
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going to see if you can do better on the 21st.
Okay, you're setting the bar pretty high.
Mike, we're ready for our next item.